Imagine being a respected judge driving through your own neighborhood, only to be pulled over by a police officer who instantly assumes you've stolen your own car. What would you do if, despite your authority and accomplishments, you were treated like a criminal simply because of your race? And when the truth finally emerges, how do you think the officer will react upon discovering who you truly are? This scenario forces us to question how often such injustices occur and what it takes for true justice to prevail. Before we begin this heartfelt story, please share in the comments where you're tuning in from today, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this. Isaiah Carr gently brushed a speck of dust off the dashboard of his brand new Lexus. Though it was only a week old, he treated it like a prized possession. The leather seats still shone with the factory's luster, and the smooth purr of the engine filled him with satisfaction. Earlier that day, he had left his office at the courthouse after a long day of back-to-back hearings, mountains of paperwork, and the burden of other people's problems. Yet, for Isaiah, the drive down the wide, tree-lined streets of Winterdale, Michigan, was his chance to decompress and regain control. The calm streets, bordered by grand homes set back from the road, stood in stark contrast to the tension he often faced at work. Unfortunately, the brief peace was about to be shattered. As Isaiah hummed along to smooth jazz on the radio, flashing blue and red lights suddenly pierced the evening calm. Glancing into his rearview mirror, he saw a police cruiser tailing him. His heart skipped a beat, and his fingers tightened around the steering wheel. Without hesitation, he pulled over. Confused yet compliant, he noted that the quiet neighborhood was far removed from the chaos of city life, and he hadn't been speeding at all. In fact, he had been driving well below the limit, enjoying a leisurely ride home after a grueling week. So what could he have done wrong? A sharp rap on the window interrupted his thoughts. Turning, Isaiah saw a tall, broad-shouldered officer with an impassive face and a hand resting near her holstered gun. "License and registration," she barked without greeting him. Isaiah reached into his glove compartment and produced his documents. The officer, whose nameplate read Officer Rhodes, snatched the papers without even glancing his way, scanning them with narrowed eyes. "Step out of the car," she ordered, leaving no room for argument. Isaiah hesitated briefly, his mind racing. He was Judge Isaiah Carr, a respected man who had presided over cases that likely involved officers from Rhodes's own department. Yet here, in his own neighborhood, he was treated as a suspect. "Ma'am, there must be some misunderstanding," he said evenly. "I'm Judge Isaiah Carr. This is my car and I live just down the street." Officer Rhodes raised an eyebrow and with a slight shift of her hand toward her holster, repeated, "Step out now," her voice hard and unyielding. Swallowing his rising indignation, Isaiah complied. He opened the door and stepped out, standing beside his car as Rhodes eyed him with a chilling look. She circled him slowly. "I've had reports of a vehicle like this being stolen last week," she said, her gaze as if she expected him to confess. Isaiah's jaw tightened. "This is my car. I purchased it a few days ago from the dealership. If you run the plates, they will come back clean." But Rhodes seemed unmoved. With her hands on the hood, she snapped, "This is unnecessary," stepping closer. Isaiah protested, his patience fraying. "I've done nothing wrong, Officer Rhodes." Her eyes glinted with suspicion, or perhaps something more sinister. "You're going to do as I say, or we'll have a problem," she declared. Though anger surged within him, Isaiah forced himself to stay calm. He knew his rights and the law. With a deep breath, he placed his hands on his car's hood, aware of the curious eyes of neighbors peeking from behind curtains as they watched his humiliation. All his life he had strived to be respected. Yet now he was reduced to a common suspect. Rhodes began a rough pat-down, her movements brusque and disrespectful. "We've had reports of car thieves in the area," she stated. "This vehicle matches the description of one stolen last week." Isaiah clenched his jaw. "I already told you this car was bought just a few days ago. If you'll let me explain." "Save it for the station," she interrupted, as she reached for her handcuffs. Isaiah's heart pounded, but he spoke calmly. "Officer Rhodes, I suggest you call your superior before making any decision you might later regret." Her hand hovered above the cuffs. "You expect me to believe that?" he said, meeting her gaze steadily. "I expect you to verify my identity and do your job properly." For a long moment her confidence faltered, and she took a step back with a frustrated huff. Then she reached for her radio, keeping her eyes locked on Isaiah. The minutes stretched as he stood there, hands on his car, while Rhodes alternated her attention between him and the radio. The air was thick with tension, and he could feel neighbors watching. Finally, the radio crackled. "Rhodes, stand down immediately. Judge Carr is a respected member of the community." "I'm on my way." As I straightened, a surge of relief mixing with lingering humiliation. Rhodes's face flushed as she lowered her radio and muttered, "I'm sorry, Your Honor. There seems to have been a misunderstanding." Adjusting his jacket, Isaiah regained his composure, though anger still simmered. "A misunderstanding," he repeated, his voice calm but firm. "Is that what we're calling racial profiling now, officer?" Before she could respond, another police car pulled up and a tall, graying man emerged. Captain Reynolds, head of the local precinct, approached urgently. "Judge Carr," he said gravely, "I cannot apologize enough for this incident. We will get to the bottom of it." Isaiah nodded, his mind racing with implications. This was not just about him. It was about countless others who had been wrongly accused or harassed. Standing there with Reynolds' apologies, Isaiah decided that this incident would be a catalyst for change. "Captain, I would like to speak with you and Officer Rhodes, not as a victim, but as someone who believes we can turn this into an opportunity for real change." Reynolds looked surprised but respectful. "Of course, Your Honor, whatever you need." Isaiah glanced around at the quiet street and the drawn curtains. He had worked too hard to be reduced to a suspect, yet he knew moments like this could spark growth and understanding. As they walked toward Reynolds' car, Isaiah wondered if this public humiliation might ignite broader conversations about the system, about justice, and about truly being seen for who you are, not merely judged by the color of your skin. Little did he know, this was only the beginning of a journey that would challenge everything he thought he knew about justice, prejudice, and the power of one person. That evening, back in the familiar comfort of his home, though little solace could be found, Isaiah replayed the encounter with Officer Rhodes in his mind. Every detail was sharp, every word echoed like a warning. He knew this was not an isolated incident, but the result of a flawed system he once thought he understood. His wife, Denise, entered quietly, sensing the storm within him. "Isaiah, what's wrong?" she asked, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. He sighed deeply. "You won't believe what happened today. I was pulled over, accused of stealing my own car." Denise's eyes widened. "What? Here in Winterdale?" He nodded. "Yes, by one of our own officers, Officer Rhodes. They had me get out of the car and subjected me to a humiliating ordeal while the neighbors watched silently." Denise's concern quickly turned to anger. "Isaiah, this is unacceptable. You're a judge. They know you. That's exactly the problem." His voice grew low and determined. "It doesn't matter who I am or what I've achieved. In their eyes, I was just another black man driving a nice car in the wrong neighborhood. If this can happen to me, what does it mean for those without the same protection?" Denise shook her head, mirroring his frustration. "This is ridiculous. Something must change." He walked to the window and gazed out at the manicured lawns and neat cars. "I spoke with the captain afterward. He suggested a program to help these officers understand what it's like on the other side of the badge. But it's not enough." Denise moved closer. "What are you going to do?" she asked softly. Isaiah turned, determination in his eyes. "I'm going to use this incident. I won't let it pass. We've been complacent for too long. I want to meet with Officer Rhodes and the entire precinct to show them what real justice looks like, not just for me, but for everyone." Danes offered a faint smile, filled with pride and worry. "I know you will, but be careful. Change doesn't happen overnight." Isaiah nodded, aware of the resistance he would face. That's why it must start now. The following week, Isaiah stood before a group of police officers in a conference room at the Winterdale Police Department. The atmosphere was thick with tension, as if past mistakes and unspoken accusations hovered overhead. Officer Rhodes sat among them, her face tight and her eyes flickering between discomfort and defiance. Captain Reynolds stood near the back, watching intently. Clearing his throat, Isaiah began, "I'm not here to lecture anyone. I'm here because I believe something must change. Last week I was pulled over, not for speeding or breaking the law, but simply because I was driving a nice car in a neighborhood where I apparently did not belong." The room fell silent as Isaiah's words sank in. I spent my life in courtrooms, watching lives change with a single decision. Yet, I was reminded that no matter what title you hold, some battles are unavoidable. His gaze swept across the room, meeting each officer's eyes. This isn't about me. It's about the system, about how we see one another, and about the assumptions we make when we judge someone like me behind the wheel of a fine car. A few nodded in agreement, though many remained stoic. We cannot change everything overnight, he continued, echoing Denise's earlier words, but we can start small. We can challenge our assumptions and understand that every biased decision hurts not just one person, but our entire community and justice system. After a pause, Officer Rhodes spoke stiffly. I was just doing my job, sir. We had reports of a stolen car and yours matched the description. Isaiah nodded calmly. I understand, but when I told you who I was and offered proof, you didn't listen. You assumed I was lying, and that is the problem. It isn't about following orders blindly, it's about recognizing when those orders are flawed. Silence followed, heavy with meaning. Captain Reynolds then asked softly, "What do we do about these biases?" Isaiah met his gaze. "We start by acknowledging them, and then we work together to dismantle them." A murmur of agreement arose. For the first time, Messiah felt hope that change might be possible, even if only in small steps. In the weeks that followed, the tension from that meeting gradually eased. Officer Rhodes agreed to shadow Isaiah in court, a step toward bridging the gap between the badge and the bench. Though her rigid demeanor made it difficult at first, Isaiah remained patient. One afternoon, after a difficult case involving a falsely accused young man, Rhodes finally broke her silence. "I never realized how much of this is out of our control," she admitted quietly as they stood alone in the empty courtroom. Surprised by her vulnerability, Isaiah asked, "What do you mean?" She sighed, her shoulders drooping. "You hear things at the station. You see people brought in and begin to make assumptions. We're trained to follow protocols, not to understand the aftermath. I've seen how lives are torn apart by a system meant to protect them. It's very different when you see it up close." Isaiah nodded gently. "It is different when you live it." Rhodes lowered her gaze, her jaw tense. "I'm sorry for what happened that day. I truly am." Isaiah paused, sensing the internal struggle in her unlearning old habits. Apologies are a start, but what matters is what you do next. Rhodes slowly nodded. "I want to do better. I want to understand." A small smile of hope appeared on Isaiah's face. "That is all I can ask for." A month later, Winterdale was rocked by national headlines. A local contractor, Apex Builders, was exposed for running unsafe construction sites and bribing city officials to overlook violations. The story was explosive on its own, but even more scandalous was the involvement of high-ranking officers from the Winterdale Police Department, some of whom had covered up the company's misdeeds. Isaiah had heard whispers of the scandal before it broke wide open, and he had even presided over related cases. However, the full extent of the corruption did not hit him until one late evening when his phone buzzed with an urgent message from Aaron, a long-time detective colleague. "We need to talk. Urgent." Isaiah met Aaron at a nearly empty diner on the edge of town. Aaron slid into the booth across from him, worry etched on his face. "What's going on?" Isaiah asked softly. Aaron glanced around before leaning in. "Apex Builders. They're in deep with some top department officials. Bribes, falsified reports. It's bigger than we thought." Isaiah frowned. "How big?" Aaron whispered. "I think the chiefs are involved, maybe even the mayor." A chill ran down Isaiah's spine. This was not just about a few bad actors, it was systemic, reaching further than he'd imagined. Aaron continued, "They've been trying to silence people, complaints have been buried, and now that the story is breaking, they're scrambling to cover their tracks." Isaiah leaned back, absorbing the weight of the revelation. "Why tell me this?" he asked. "Because you're the only one I trust, and I need your help." "You're in a position to expose this truth," Aaron replied steadily. Isaiah nodded, his mind racing with implications. If the corruption was as extensive as Aaron suspected, then this was not just a local issue. It threatened the community's trust in its leaders. "All right," Isaiah finally said. "I'll help, but we must be cautious. If they're willing to cover this up, they won't hesitate to silence anyone who gets in their way. Iran nodded grimly. I know, we must move fast. Over the next few days, Isaiah worked discreetly, gathering evidence, reviewing court records, and examining dismissed complaints. The deeper he dug, the more entangled the police department appeared with apex builders. Under-the-table payments, secret meetings, and falsified reports painted a damning picture of corruption, a web that threatened to ensnare anyone who came too close. It was about money, power, and unchecked authority. Late one night, while reviewing documents in his office, Isaiah received another message from Aaron. They know. Be careful. His pulse quickened as he realized the more he uncovered, the more dangerous it became. Outside, the wind rustled the oak tree in his front yard, a stark contrast to the storm in his life. He knew he had to be smart. This was no longer just about his reputation, it was his life on the line. Aaron made it clear that time was running out. Now that those in power knew what he was investigating, Isaiah had no doubt they would try to silence him. It was nearly midnight. Though Denise had gone to bed, Isaiah's mind raced with the implications of his discoveries and the looming consequences. He needed more concrete evidence, but he couldn't do it alone. He needed trusted allies. The next morning, Isaiah met Aaron in a small park on the outskirts of town. The early sun cast long shadows, and the crisp air carried the promise of change. Aaron was already there, pacing by a bench, his brow furrowed. Thanks for coming, Aaron said as he shook Isaiah's hand. I don't have much time, we need to talk strategy. Isaiah scanned the park for any signs of danger. How bad is it? He asked. Aaron admitted, worse than I thought. I've heard enough to know they're onto us. They've been watching me. Isaiah leaned in. We need to access the internal police records, everything related to Apex Builders, and any communications among the officers involved. That's our only way to expose them. Aaron nodded. I'm working on it. There's a chance I can breach their database, but it's risky. If anyone finds out, it'll be over for both of us. Isaiah rubbed his temples. I know the stakes, but we can't turn back now. We'll keep our circle small. Just you, me, and a couple more people we trust. Once we have all the evidence, we go public. Through the media, the Attorney General's office, someone outside who can't be bought. Aaron's eyes hardened with resolve. I'll start tonight, but we must be ready for everything. Isaiah's jaw tightened. I know, but they won't scare us off. That evening, as the sun dipped below Winterdale's quiet streets, Isaiah sat with Denise and explained everything in detail. Her face grew serious as he described the ordeal. When he finished, Denise shook her head in disbelief. Isaiah, this is dangerous. These people are powerful. What if they hurt you? He replied. If I don't do this, who will? I've seen what they're capable of. They're ruining lives. Denise pleaded. Promise me you'll be careful. We need you. Isaiah gently squeezed her hand. I promise. In the following week, covert meetings, late-night calls, and careful planning consumed their days. Isaiah and Aaron gathered evidence without drawing attention, combing through old case files, reviewing court documents, and speaking quietly with key individuals connected to Apex Builders. Every new piece of evidence painted a damning picture of corruption within Winterdale, officers receiving kickbacks, ignoring violations, and falsifying reports. Isaiah realized they were sitting on a powder keg, and it would only take one spark to set it off. Determined, Isaiah used his lifelong commitment to the law to bring those responsible to justice. One evening, Aaron called in a hushed tone. I've got it. The records, payments, emails, phone calls. There's no denying it. Adrenaline surged through Isaiah. Where are you? He asked. I'm at the station printing everything out. Meet me at the diner in 30 minutes, Aaron replied. Isaiah hung up, his heart racing. They had what they needed to expose the conspiracy. Yet as he grabbed his keys, a nagging unease settled in his gut, a premonition that something was about to go wrong. Isaiah arrived at the diner a few minutes early. The dim lights cast long shadows over the nearly empty booths. The waitress nodded in recognition but paid little attention as he sat near the back, scanning the parking lot through the front window. Aaron was supposed to be there, but there was no sign of him. Then, a message. On my way. 5 minutes. Isaiah drummed his fingers on the table as the quiet grew oppressive. 5 minutes passed, then 10, with still no sign of Aaron. Another message arrived, sending a chill down his spine. "They're on to me. Get out before..." Before he could react, the diner's door swung open. 2 men in dark suits entered, their eyes immediately locking onto him. They moved with purpose, clearly not locals. His heart pounded as he stood. One of them said coldly, "Judge Carr, we need to have a word." Isaiah backed away, realizing they intended to silence him. Without hesitating, he bolted for the back door. His feet pounded on the tiled floor as he sprinted toward the exit. The men shouted, their footsteps close behind him. He burst into the alley, the cool night air striking his face, and sprinted toward his car parked just around the corner. As he reached for the door handle, a firm hand clamped onto his shoulder and yanked him back. Isaiah spun around, fists clenched and ready to fight, when a familiar voice halted him. "Isaiah, it's me," said Aaron, his face pale and sweating. "We've got to go, now." Isaiah jumped into the car without questioning, and Aaron followed as they slammed the door shut. "They know everything," Aaron panted, glancing nervously out the window. "We've been compromised." Isaiah gripped the steering wheel tightly. "What do we do now?" he asked. Aaron's eyes were filled with desperation. "We need to go public tonight." In silence, the city lights blurred as they sped toward the local news station, the one place where they could expose the truth. Aaron clutched a folder filled with hard-won evidence. "This is it," he said quietly, as if convincing both himself and Isaiah. "Once we get this out, there's no turning back." Isaiah nodded, his jaw set. "I know, but we have no other choice." They arrived at the station just after midnight. The building was eerily quiet, with only a few late-night employees working. After flashing their IDs, they were directed to the studio where preparations for the live broadcast were underway. The producer, a sharp-eyed woman named Lisa Chen, greeted them with raised eyebrows. "What brings a judge and a detective here at this hour?" she asked skeptically. Isaiah said without delay, "We have evidence of widespread corruption in the police department and city government. We need to go on air now." Lisa crossed her arms. "Do you have proof?" Heron handed her the folder, his hands trembling. "Everything is here. Names, dates, payments. It's all documented." Lisa flipped through the papers, her eyes widening as she scanned the contents, then looked up at Isaiah. "You realize that once this airs, it will blow up and there will be consequences for everyone involved," she said. Isaiah remained steady. "We know, but this needs to be done." After studying the folder for a long moment, Lisa nodded quietly. "All right, we'll do it." Isaiah and Aaron exchanged a brief look of relief, though they knew it was only the beginning. Once public, the fallout would be immediate and brutal. Those behind the corruption would fight to silence them. Lisa led them into the studio where the team was finalizing preparations. The anchor, a calm-faced man named Jeff Lawson, was at his desk. When Lisa approached him, she said, "Jeff, we're going live with this." Placing the folder on his desk, she added, "This is bigger than anything we've ever covered." Jeff read a few lines, then looked up at Isaiah and Aaron with a hardened expression. "This is real?" he asked. Isaiah replied, "Yes, and we must tell the public before it's too late." Jeff took a deep breath and nodded. "All right, we'll get ready." As the clock ticked closer to midnight, the team hurried to finalize the broadcast. Cameras were adjusted, lights fixed, and Isaiah and Aaron were ushered into the makeup room. With the final preparations complete, Isaiah felt a mix of dread and resolve. This was the moment they had built toward, the moment when everything would either succeed or crumble. The truth was heavy, but necessary. There was no turning back now. The countdown began. Sitting next to Aaron under bright studio lights, their faces reflected on nearby monitors, the air thick with tension, Isaiah could hear his own heartbeat. Jeff Lawson took his place at the anchor desk, shuffling his notes. The camera light blinked red, signaling that they were live. "In 5, 4, 3, the producer counted down. Jeff looked into the camera, his voice calm yet filled with gravity. "Good evening. We interrupt your regular programming for a special report." Isaiah felt the weight of the moment. There was no turning back. The broadcast began with a brief introduction of Isaiah and Aaron, outlining their credentials. Jeff then handed over the floor. "Tonight, we bring you a story that will shake the foundation of this community, he announced. Corruption, bribery, and abuse of power have infiltrated the highest levels of local government and the police department. With me tonight are Judge Isaiah Carr and Detective Aaron Walker, who have uncovered a web of criminal activity that has gone unchecked for years. Isaiah cleared his throat, his voice calm but resolute. What we have uncovered is evidence of widespread corruption within the Winterdale Police Department and Apex Builders, a local construction company long involved in illegal activities. High-ranking officers have accepted bribes to cover up safety violations, falsify reports, and silence dissent. The camera then cut to Aaron, who elaborated, "We have documented evidence of payments made to officers in exchange for turning a blind eye. The corruption runs deep, and the leadership in both the police department and city government has been complicit." Isaiah's heart raced as he continued, "For too long this corruption has gone unchecked. Tonight we bring it to light. We have the documents, the proof, and we are sharing it with you. This is not just about one company or department, it's about justice and holding those in power accountable." The broadcast lasted less than 30 minutes, but by its end the studio buzzed with activity. Phones rang, social media exploded, and the truth was now out. Yet as the team wrapped up, Isaiah's phone buzzed with a message. "You shouldn't have done that. Now you've made it personal." His stomach dropped. He knew the people they exposed would not sit quietly. They would come after him, after Aaron, after anyone involved. The fight was far from over. Quickly, he showed the message to Aaron, whose face darkened. "They're coming," Aaron said. Isaiah nodded, his voice steady yet tense. "We need to be ready." In the days that followed, chaos reigned. The story spread like wildfire, reaching Winterdale, neighboring cities, and even the state capital. Protests erupted outside the police station and city hall. Isaiah and Aaron were thrust into the spotlight as symbols of the fight for justice, but with recognition came danger. Anonymous messages, late-night calls, and strange cars parked outside their homes became routine. Isaiah had expected backlash, but not like this. It wasn't just his reputation at stake, but his family's safety. One night, while sitting at the kitchen table with dinner left untouched, Denise urged, "You should go to the police." Isaiah shook his head firmly. "I can't. They're part of this. We can't trust anyone on the inside." Denise's hands trembled as she reached for her glass of water. "So what do we do?" Isaiah clenched his fists. "We stay strong and keep pushing. We've exposed them and now they're scared. They want us to back down, but we simply can't." Tears welled in Denise's eyes as she reached for his hand. "I don't want to lose you. Promise me you'll be careful." Gently, he promised, "I promise." Meanwhile, Aaron had taken refuge in a motel on the outskirts, keeping a low profile as the threats escalated. One night, while in his dingy room, his phone buzzed with a call. Expecting another threat, he answered, and it was Lisa Chen from the news station. "Aaron, I just got word from a source." "There's a warrant out for your arrest," she said tensely. Aaron froze. "What are they accusing me of?" he asked softly. "Tampering with evidence in a previous case," she explained. "It's a setup. They're coming for you." Aaron's heart pounded. "Thanks for the heads up," he said, voice tight, and then hung up, knowing he had to act fast. He quickly packed and slipped out of the motel, scanning the parking lot for danger. The next morning, Isaiah received a call from Aaron. "They're after me. I've got a warrant out for my arrest," Aaron said. Isaiah's heart sank. "For what? Tampering with evidence?" Aaron replied, "It's all fabricated. They're trying to take me down." Isaiah's mind raced. "Where are you?" he demanded. "I can't stay in one place too long," Aaron answered, "but we need to act. They're trying to make us disappear." Nodding grimly, Isaiah said, "We'll fight this, but we need someone higher up to blow this conspiracy wide open." After a pause, Aaron added in a low voice, "There's one more thing. I got a tip from someone inside. There's more going on than just corruption with Apex Builders. They're involved in something bigger, connected to the police department. It's not just about covering up violations, it's about controlling the town." Isaiah felt a chill. "What are you talking about?" he demanded. "There's a network, a web of people running this town from the shadows. Apex Builders is just a front. The real power lies with those pulling the strings, and they will do anything to keep it that way." Isaiah's grip tightened on the phone. "Who's behind it?" he asked urgently. "I don't know yet," Aaron admitted, "but I'm going to find out. I just need time." Isaiah's mind raced. This was bigger than he'd ever imagined. It wasn't just corrupt officers or a shady construction company. It was something far more dangerous that could destroy everything.